Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another learning session with Digital Excellence Pharma Academy, a joint initiative of CredoWeb and Medicine Man. Today, we have a very special guest, and I'm sure that you're all waiting to listen to him because Atish Majumdar is now the president of Mankind Pharma, probably the only pharma company in India that has made such a huge difference to our understanding of pharmaceutical sales and marketing. So, Atish has had a fantastic career path, starting as a management trainee with Lupin, moving all the way up to vice president at Lupin in a career spanning over 21 years. I wish there were more people whose resume would be so simple. And he's currently the president of Mankind Pharma. He's had experience with the Indian market, the market in Bangladesh, as well as in Sri Lanka. So that gives him a very wide perspective of what's really happening because of the COVID crisis and the ensuing leadership imperative, which is what he is going to be talking about because the impact of COVID 19 is not something that is restricted to a couple of months or even a year. It's a long term impact, and therefore, the challenge is really for the leaders how they look at it and how they turn this crisis into an opportunity. So, as John Maxwell, the author of 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, has so well put it, everything rises and falls on leadership. That is going to be the key theme of this webinar. So, over to you, Atish, for a wonderful learning session.
Hello, everyone. At the outset, my sincere thanks to Anup Sohans and Deep Bhandari for having me here. I have been an avid reader of Medicine Man for a long time. And though I have spoken on the Medicine Man platform quite some time back physically, I think this is the first time I'm doing it digitally. I am to talk to you about today on COVID-19 and the leadership imperative. I guess there is today no conversation is complete without the mention of this COVID-19 virus. It has completely changed the way we live, the way we look at things, and the way we perceive things. And I think over the last period of 6 months, each one of us have traveled a journey where we have introspected, found new meanings in the things that we do, and as we step into the new normal, I do sincerely believe leadership in mind, leadership in thought, and leadership in action is going to be the big differential. It was a differential in the world that we left behind, and I believe it will be an equally important differential in the world we step in now. Over the next 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so, what I will do is take you through what is my understanding of the crisis, the changes that it is driving, and how it is impacting us on a day-to-day basis from a pharma perspective, and then maybe talk to you about what we have done in Mankind over the last 7 months. What you see on your screen now is a photo of an egg, and its shadow is that of a hen. I think in many ways, this is the essence of leadership. Finding life within what is lifeless, seeing the potential when the potential is not visible. I think that is the essence of leadership. And this came out in HBR quite some time back, but I am totally enthralled with this photo. And that is what I think today people need to look at when they view the crisis and how it is being played out. There is an opportunity seated within the crisis. And I think the leadership imperative is to really, really find that opportunity. We have been talking about the crisis. COVID-19 found at Wuhan December 19, no big news to everybody. As on date, impacted more than 7.8 billion lives across the world. A small virus, a small insidious virus of 0.85 attograms, which is 1 trillionth of a gram. And you look at what kind of devastation this virus has caused. We are living a life today which we had never ever imagined. Right back in April, May, we gave up everything that we thought was important and stuck within our homes. This is what this virus has done to us. A very small virus. In fact, so small that, if you were to look at 5 million people getting infected, what you require is 1 gram of the virus. In many ways, it tells us about what we as a human race know about our ecosystem, our environment. But then that is what it is. Life has got drastically impacted with this contagious virus. And, daily we see the epidemic progressing. And, across the continents, you will see the growth happening more so in India. We continue to grow. Today, we are at 7.6 million and about have 115,000 fatalities. So this is the size of the crisis that we are seeing today. But this crisis, unlike other crises, is not singular in nature. It is plural. There are other areas which it is impacting, mostly economy and obviously the health part of it. So what I'll do now is look at the implications. There are certain things where we are seeing positive transformations, and there are certain areas where we are seeing not so positive transformations. So the lasting implication of this COVID-19 crisis will basically, in my understanding, be on three frontiers. One is healthcare. Luckily, we are in that segment. The second is economy, and the third is digital. And we see transformation being driven in all these three areas at a very, very fast pace. So let's start with healthcare. What you see on your screen now is the four waves of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what I would like you to concentrate on is when I'm talking about the fourth wave, where we are talking about the outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic. See, one thing we totally understand today, that the mortality is low. It is a big, big public health scare because of the duration that one has to spend confined. Otherwise, you would end up infecting people. More importantly, we do understand that there is some kind of an inflammatory process getting triggered. So you need to cover the patient with anticoagulants also, people who are in that age group and with the risk factors. But most importantly, for us in business, it is important to understand that this lockdown, whether you're getting infected or not infected, has an impact on mental health. And I think that is very, very important for leaders to understand. There is a cognitive overload taking place on a daily basis for everybody. You have work from home, and we all know about it. And Qualtrics did a study sometime in April. They covered around 2,700 respondents or participants across the 7 continents. And what they found was substantial increase in the incidence of generalized anxiety disorders, in the incidence of depression, and also of suicidal tendencies. So that is an implication which is going to stay with us, and that is something as leaders we must all take cognizance of. Having said that, healthcare, I think the kind of advertisement that healthcare has got from COVID, the small virus has given or has done things which we could never ever comprehend or we could have ever achieved as an industry. The kind of advertisement that we have got as healthcare, suddenly people do understand health is the number one priority. We gave up what we thought was important. We always thought our work was more important, our getting that car was more important, getting that flat was more important, and that car was lying in the garage and you could never ever drive it during this lockdown period. So I think today the one thing that COVID has done has increased the awareness about taking care of one's health, about caring for one's health, which we in the healthcare segment, we all want to achieve. So this awareness is definitely going to lead to a more conscious, a more aware population, and if I may say so, patients, right? Now, how do we foresee this manifesting? See, the global GDP is expected to be somewhere around 142 trillion in 2040 from now in 2020 with an annual growth rate of 2.6%. With this greater awareness of healthcare, we believe global GDP could rise by more than 12 trillion in this 20-year period. And this is from McKinsey Institute data, where we believe this awareness will lead to fewer early deaths, this consciousness, about keeping oneself fit, taking the right food, staying home, masking yourself, and fewer health conditions, expanded participation, increased productivity. This 12 trillion addition to the GDP would come from one single factor: greater awareness of healthcare. So we definitely see an underlying transformation taking place over here in the way people think, in the way they act, right? The second area is definitely economy. When you look at a crisis like this, I already told you it's a plural crisis. Why? Because isolation is the best thing to do in this crisis. When you think about the coronavirus, practicing social distancing, being isolated is a positive externality actually. So isolation for COVID is a positive externality. But for the economy, it is a negative externality. If you don't go to work, you stay in home, it hits the economy. If you do not purchase as much as you are doing, the liquidity in the market will go down. And that's exactly what we are seeing. This graph which you see, these 5 graphs which you see, comes from a London School of Economics paper. And this talks about why is the crisis actually happened. See, if you look at February, even if you look at the pharma industry, we grew at 14.5%. Very fast growth, driven by insecurity on the part of patients that medicine supply will be impacted. So what did we see? An inflated demand taking place and a disrupted supply, right? So what essentially happened was the supply chain got disrupted. They thought the supply chain is getting disrupted, so an artificial demand was created. Then the supply chain was put back into place by different manners. So what happened? The supply took place, right? But by then, the demand went down because now the outlook had changed. The extra stocking which was taking place, that got changed. So the aggregate demand and supply went into a loop. It went on coming down, leading to a destruction of the economic surplus, and which really drives the economy. So this aggregate lowering of demand and supply continuously happening is creating an economic crisis, and this becomes an area of intervention for leaders, right? If you are thinking of growing, if you are thinking of thriving, which I maybe will talk to you about as we go along, I think what is important, very important, is to see, how do you get this aggregate demand supply going on? Because the supply is a function of the demand at the end of the day, right? So somewhere you will have to drive that demand. And the global uncertainty unfortunately continues. What we saw from 2008 after the depression, we have had the Euro crisis, the Brexit referendum, the US 2016 elections, and now you have the COVID thing going on. The uncertainty level still continues. Slow recovery is expected, and we are seeing that India has not done well in the first quarter. We degrew by 23%. Our GDP, and even now for the second quarter, I think China has bounced back with a positive growth. Bangladesh has grown very nicely, but India's growth has been very minimal. If you look at the global indices, there is a certain amount of bounce back taking back from, if you compare with March. But as you can see from these graphs, it is mainly driven by the top 10 players who are in a certain industry. Most of them are in the IT segment. So that's what is happening in the economy. The take home here is to understand that there is a certain amount of bounce back taking place, and it is basically driven by certain sectors. As of now, it looks like this. Now, coming to digital, I think the biggest transformation has taken place here. From a promise to go digital, we have all gone digital. But the fact is, every crisis, the world has seen has led to a digital acceleration. When the Spanish flu came around 30, 35 years before that, the telephone had come. But the fact is, the telephone usage went up by 40% when the Spanish flu came. When SARS 2003 came, we saw the rise of online businesses. We saw the growth of Alibaba. When 2008 recession came, we saw the concept of shared digital economy, Uber, Airbnb. So I think every crisis leads to an acceleration in digital usage and digital adoption. So while we were always promising to go digital, especially in the pharma sector, I think with the COVID crisis, we went digital. And this transformation was always happening, though at a slower rate. There are multiple things changing in the market. The big change was happening in how medicine is practiced. I think there has been a shift in the last 10 years from managing the disease to managing the patient. And this shift is mainly driven by the rise of the non communicable diseases. And today, I think doctors understand the need to really, really keep a track on the patient right through his journey. And this change is driving the need for an integrated platform which gives you that sighting. In addition, we have also seen on the 28th of March this year, the government of India approved the teleconsultation guidelines. And we do know that this crisis actually accelerated this transformation. Teleconsultation is going to stay here, that's for sure. And I think going ahead, it will be a combination of meeting a patient physically and meeting a patient online. That is how practice is going to take place. How medicine is prescribed, I think this is also changing. This is what is driving us towards the digital imperative. I think we live in a time of evidence based medicine, which is tremendously data driven. Doctors want to have a citing of the clinical trials, the evidence built therein. Electronic medicine, medical records are something which doctors do now need to keep, not because of regulatory directions, but more because you really want to manage the patient journey. Plus, we are also seeing prescription apps come in. So today you're prescribing something, but you also want to know how is the patient going to stay with this drug? What is the rate of continuity that is happening? So how medicine is prescribed is also changing. How is medicine purchased? I think this went through the biggest change in India, especially. In 2019, the online pharmacy business was rated around $0.5 billion with a penetration around 2.5%. Going ahead, by 2025, the online pharmacy business is projected to be around $4.5 billion with a CAGR of nearly 44% and a penetration of 12% in the IPM. That is huge. So how people purchase medicine is changing, and how is medicine promoted? I think this was the one which got us all thinking. As far as I can remember, we have been going and meeting doctors, trying to influence their prescription behavior by our sincerity, by our services, by our communication. This is what we have been doing, and then this COVID happens. And suddenly we realize that we still have to connect to our doctors. We still have to talk to them, but now we have to do it remotely. And so we are seeing a real transformation happening in the way we promote our own drugs and how is medicine consumed. Again, this has changed. I just talked to you about the digital apps. There are multiple digital apps getting prescribed today by doctors because doctors wants to be updated on real time as to how is the medicine responding, especially with the rise of the personalized medicines. So the transformation is happening, and that is leading us to go digital simply because of the change, the transformation happening in multiple interfaces. And the transformation agenda for any leader today would be to refocus digital efforts towards changing customer expectations. That is something we need to do, and use new data. In the pharma industry, what you have is big data. So you need to get new data, real-time data, act on it, and AI here will help you to improve your business operations. So whether it is supply chain, customer engagement, analytics, this is going to be driven big time by digital. We also need to see that we write off technology, which is no longer very useful, right? There are newer platforms coming. So there is always an inertia in the leadership to change those platforms. But I think all leaders, what they sought, needs to take that one step because that is a leadership step and write off technology debts and selectively modernize their technology based on the compatibilities of their current system and increase organizational trumpets. Trumpets for years have been used to make people aware either of danger or of a celebration. So organization trumpets must be tuned, played in such a manner that the digital transformation can be accelerated. Now, learning from previous crises. Before we do that, I think just to sum up so far, we are in the midst of a crisis, a real plural crisis. Two curves getting flattened slowly but steadily. One is the obviously the pandemic curve, which we want as human beings, and the second is what we do not want, the economic curve. We see transformations in the healthcare segment driven by great awareness with every individual, and we see an imperative to transform digitally. I think since forever and in history, we know that technology has always been an advantage. Right from the times of Genghis Khan, who discovered the technology of how to fight sitting on a horse, to the Britishers who discovered guns, the cannons, technology has always been an advantage, and today is no exception. Your ability to use technology to your advantage in engaging, exciting your customers, to engaging, exciting your team, improving productivities, improving your service functions. Technology will give you that edge. So learning from previous crises, if you look at the graph here, since 1986, there have been four downturns in the US. But every time the downturns happened, we saw increased sales growth and expanding EBITDA margin in 14% of companies, and 44% of companies went down, right? And we know about Alibaba, we know about Amazon, how they shifted focus towards third-party sellers, changed their ecosystem, and outpaced other retailers in their growth. So there have been companies which have done well in spite and despite the crisis. If you look at in India, in our home country, in 2008-9, 18% of the top 1,000 public companies improved both their sales and EBITDA margins. If you look at the second side of the graph, you will see the difference between the companies which performed and the companies which did not. In revenue growth was nearly plus 23 percentage points. The same is with the EBITDA margins. All I'm trying to drive here is that in spite all the crises around, there have always been companies which have been outliers, which have led, which have not given up on the concept of leadership, and which have grown during these times. There are times we think perhaps this is because of the way we are positioned. We are in a certain industry, that is why we grow. But then the fact is, today when we see during a crisis, there are top performers in every single segment. Every industry, there are people who are growing their EBITDA and growing their profits. The key issue here is, what is the differential between these companies, say in the same industry? What is making them do well as compared to a company which is not doing well? And the key differential in each of these organizations is leadership. And that is why I talk to you today about the leadership imperative. See, crises like this are unique to mankind. The Great Plague happened in 2018, and now after such a long time, 102 years, you have a COVID crisis. But in business, we see a lot of plural crises, not of this magnitude, but we do see a lot of crises which has multiple origins. And that is why leadership becomes so very important to manage and navigate those crises. I have always believed, leadership is an influence response process. And I think an understanding of leadership in this perspective becomes critically important in crises. How do you respond is very, very important in a crisis, because what is happening is something which you had not thought about, right? And we might say that this kind of a crisis is unprecedented, but the fact remains that how you respond creates precedence. See, if you look at it, the video cassette recorder, it went out of business because of streaming happening. And this is how people kind of rationalize it. But if you really ask me, it's also got to do with the fact that they never responded. On the other hand, you had Starbucks come in, and because of which so many small coffee shops had to shut shops. And we say because Starbucks came in, but the fact remains, it was the inability of these coffee shops to respond, to really understand their customers, that for people sitting on a torn sofa or a not very good ambience and taking a coffee was not the in thing. I think Starbucks understood this inability to respond. It was not a BlackBerry or smartphones or iPhones which took Nokia out of their, no, I won't say business, but took their market share in the first phase one. What happened was the inability of Nokia to respond. And I think that is the essence of managing a crisis. How do you respond? Right? And today, I think that is the imperative of organizations across sectors, across industry. If there are certain people winning, it's only got to do with the fact that they're responding much better. They're responding with empathy, they're responding with understanding, and they are responding keeping the big picture in mind. If you look at this picture right in front of your screens, you have a paraplegic and you have someone who has just won a lottery, right? And both these incidents are life turning for both the individuals. If someone were to ask anyone, who do you think will be happier 1 year from now? This is the normal answer. This is what we think. Because we feel that a stroke, a paralysis resulting out of the stroke would greatly derail the person's life, which is a fact. And yes, he will be unhappy because of that. Whereas a lottery owner with so much money is going to be so happy. But the fact is, and the reality is, when this was studied, it was found that the lottery winner was marginally, literally statistically insignificant, happier than the paraplegic, right? And this was published in the HBR in 2004. Now, what is important to understand here for leaders is that the inflection point, the point where the crisis takes place, is no indication of what you will be 5 years from now or 1 year from now. What is important to understand here, you have to synthesize happiness, right? Similarly, you have to synthesize performance. It's not about where you are, it's about where you're going to be and what you do during the journey. I think that is very important for leaders to understand. You can get hit by a crisis, but that should not impact your outlook. That should not impact how you look at things right ahead in the future. So I believe that today, for all leaders in this COVID world, it is important and imperative to think and act on three dimensions. The first is to have a resilient mindset, a mindset which believes we can bounce back. Together as a team, as an organization, we can bounce back. It is important to not think about survival, but think of thriving, think about growing. Do not give up on your aspirations. It's very, very important for a leader to have that mindset. The discipline of thinking right is a key differential for a leader today. The second is about how you manage your teams, right? It is important to take an integrated perspective on health, medical progression, what is happening in your ecosystem, what is governmental response, societal reactions, economic implications, to understand your own business and sector impacts, right? It is very important to understand this, or you will end up making critically wrong decisions, which will have a far-reaching impact on your team and your customers and hence on your business. And the last part, the third dimension, which I think is very important, is to really understand that during a crisis, we normally think short term. right? We think 15 days, we think 7 days, maybe some of us think 21 days. You are looking at navigating the short term. And it's not wrong, that's the right thing to do. But as we slowly come out of it, one should be doing that, but with a clear sight on what is the emerging new normal and with a clear agenda of reinventing your business based on the new normal and to think multi-time scale. It's like you're doing a campaign, right? Or an activity and thinking that if I were to do the same activity, say 1 year down the line, how would it look? So every step you take now that we're coming out of the crisis, we have started reclaiming our lives. It's important to think of every campaign, every activity, every strategy on a multi-time scale. How will it manifest 2 years from now? How will it manifest 3 years from now? I think this three dimensions become very, very important for leaders to do well. Now, when I talk about an integrated leadership approach, it's important to demonstrate empathy and kindness. Since the times of the savannah, people have come around to leaders to keep them safe, to keep them secure. They have been around the leader, depending on him, just to keep them safe and secure, and it has not changed. This is something right deep down in our DNA. And in a crisis, people expect that more from you than anything else. And this is a very easy thing to write, but a very, very difficult thing to practice. But this is something all leaders at every level must practice. We must restate the purpose of our business, the purpose of a unit. What do we want to do? We need to keep on restating that. In crises, it is important to take decisions based on effect rather than side effect. Normally we talk about policies and, deviations of which could have far reaching effects. They are perfectly right. But in crises, you need to make decisions which will give you the effect that you're looking at. And if you have to break certain policies, it's important to deviate from those policies in the short run. You need to communicate. You need to communicate. In fact, you can over communicate and connect with your team. That's what helps you to build resilience. It is belief and it is infectious, right? The more you talk to people, the more you will learn about the challenges they're facing. They will learn about how you are negotiating the challenge, and that will build in resilience in your team. During the lockdown, most of us focused on efficiency. But I think as we come out of the lockdown, it is important to focus on effectiveness. See, efficiency is a process word. Effectiveness is a result word. And this marginal shift, this tweak, is what leaders have to now start focusing on effectiveness. And do the math, digital versus physical. These two are going to stay. It's how you balance the two. What do you want to reclaim is your call to take. But you need to balance. You probably can't dream of a world which existed in January or November. You will have to get used to this new world. And it's all about balance. What do you want to do physically and what do you want to do digitally? And reduce wastages. Critical thing always, perhaps more important during crises. Besides this, like I told you, that we need to think multi-time scale. You need to think multi-time scale, which is very important. But most important, that during crises, if you are thinking growth, you are thinking leadership, then you need ideas which will help you reach there. And this big idea, it's very, very important to get it right? You need to speak to your customers, understand, because at the end of the day, it is always about what your customer wants. So check your big idea with the customer, filter it through the customer. And if you have got it right, then decide where do you want to go. Once you decide that, work on your strategy, then plan. The strategy must happen before the planning, because strategy talks about where you want to finish, whereas planning talks about what do you want to do and how do you want to do. Once this is done, communicate, then execute. We all do this in a normal day-to-day life. And then as you go along, see, always understand in crisis, people tend to think about themselves. So what happens? You normally tend to forget about competition. You pretend as if what you are doing is everything. But competition exists. Even in crises, your competitors are there. They are trying to make the best out of the situation. You need to have that kind of respect and understand they're not static. They're doing something, right? And so you must keep on learning from your own strategy and from your competitors and put it right back into the big idea. It's important to close the loop because in crises, the real time situation keeps on changing. And you need to change your big idea with the feedback that you're getting while you are executing your strategy. If you're very fixated on your big idea and you cannot close the loop, you probably cannot be successful. And as we come out of this crisis, it's important to extrapolate this to a multi-time scale. This, I think, what leaders should be doing. Just to sum up, I think the first and most important thing for a leader is to think about himself, think about his own mind. How is it working? Right? Is the hunger still there? Because only when all this is there and only when you believe will you be able to communicate to your team members, you'll be able to touch your team members because the morale of the team is the most important thing for any organization. I firmly believe this. I believe at the center of the idea of an organization is not product, not processes, it is people. It always was, it always is going to be like that. And so, if you have to get the morale up, it is always important to act with empathy, with understanding, and to connect with your team. And once you have done that, you also need to have strategies, ideas which you will try, which will help you to beat the market and to satisfy your customers. This is what I think is the leadership imperative for organizations across segments. Having said that, I think it's also important I talk to you about what we in Mankind did in the last 7 months. How did we fare and what did we do? At Mankind, I think we believe in keeping everything simple. And as I take you through the slides, you will see that we have kept it very simple, uncomplicated. Now, how did we fare? This is our growth trend. I think in the last 12 months, we have been the fastest growing corporate on a MAT basis. And you can see, especially during the peak of the crisis, say in the month of February, the market grew at 13, we grew at 22. March, market grew at 9, we grew at 23. We simply grew much faster than the market. And we have been the fastest growing company, like I told you. In terms of secondary uptake in the first half of the year, we are the fastest. By prescription, we are number one. On a MAT basis, June also we are number one. We are ranked fourth by volume. All these small achievements are but milestones in our journey, and that is the way we look at it. And it only gives us confidence and inspires us to work harder and do better. Now, how did we go about achieving this? When we were looking at the market and the crisis happening, I think response was one of the first things we as an organization did. Most of you will not know, but Mankind, we went into lockdown nearly 7 days before the country went into a lockdown. Simply because we were, like I keep on saying, you need to understand the situation. So we went into a lockdown looking at what was happening globally. And as we looked at the new normal shaping up, we realized something, as a pharma company, we know very little about the consumer, right? We know a lot about our customers. So we set our sight on the consumer. And what did we see? We saw a channel shift taking place, an accelerated shift to online. We saw a shift to value, because of an emerging economic crisis. People were looking at value, they wanted to get more from less. And there were income concerns, postponement of discretionary spend, all this happening. People started seeking value. There was a focus on health and hygiene. I think I've talked about this a lot, but we did see this shift taking place. And home became the new sanctuary. This is the place where everybody was thriving, right? We started recreating aspects of our work, aspects of our social life within the confines of our home. It became imperative for us to understand this and respect this. This is what was emerging. And entertainment at home really went up. Same is with work from home. The meetings went up in the home, and we saw this happening. There was a shock to loyalty. There were brands which were smaller brands which were tremendously supported by certain category of customers, but we saw them taking a big beating during the crisis, and we saw a brand loyalty levels come down drastically because of the shift to value, definitely, and also about access driving loyalty. And that is why you saw the rise of generics and low priced brands taking place during this phase. And more than low price, I think it was the big brands which got the maximum mileage, and the rural renewal. We saw consumption go up in the rural marketplaces simply because of the reverse migration. So essentially, what did we see? We saw a shift in the way consumers were behaving. And today, I personally feel, that it's high time for pharma, with digital becoming such a big play, to really understand your patients, right? And it will be a very important differential in the years to come. And that's precisely what we did as a team: understand what were the shifts taking place in the customer. A lasting impact of COVID-19 on the Indian pharma market. Yes, there was a shift to digital. The physician was trained, and this is IQVIA data. And of course, affordability and access was something which was driving business. We saw an increased demand for generic drugs, 20-30% increase in insurance, which always augurs well for the pharma market. And these are impacts which are going to stay with us in the next 5-10 years, right? The emergence of a digital world, I think this is not something new to all of you. I think today we understand that we'll have to blend our physical interaction with our customers with online interactions. And I think that is something which is going to stay with us. Now, having said this, having seen these trends emerge in the marketplace, what did we do? Like I told you, we keep it very simple. We just tried to understand what was happening. So while everybody rushed around doing webinars and going into very aggressive work from home strategies, we went very slow because we needed to understand. And based on the understanding, we responded in the marketplace and did try to reinvent those aspects of our business propositions, our processes, which would help us, grow faster than what we are doing now. So if I were to tell you what did we do, the whole approach was developed a scenario-based planning approach. Now, when I talk about a scenario-based planning approach, I talk about, say, 15 days, 2 weeks. That is the timelines we're looking at. And we really focused on building capabilities of our team. Obviously, we had a response and transformation team, which kept us up to date. We met them very often, and the interactions were very high frequency so that our response could be very good. We also revamped our organization proposition for the new reality. We changed the way we recruited, the way we inducted people, the way we trained our people, and the way we interacted with the customers, and also looked at our product portfolios, tried to make it in tune with the emerging reality. Redefine our customer value proposition. I think we all realized that there was a shift taking place in the way we interact with customers. We saw that early on in April, May. But we realized something, that it is important to train your people to meet this new normal. If you want to go conquer the Everest, you need to be trained for that. And we spent a substantial amount of time training our people. It is only after the first 21 to 28 days that we really started interacting with the customer big time. The full time was spent in training the team, because essentially at Mankind, we believe it's not about remote detailing, it's about remote connection. That's what we started telling our people. You need to learn how to connect with your customers. It's not about doing the job, it's about connecting with your customer. It's not about opening a visual aid, right? It's not about doing a WhatsApp call. It's not about doing an online call. It's about really connecting with your customers. And that you'll have to find out a way, a trigger as to how will you do it. And each customer is unique. And so it is this mindset to connect that will help you navigate this situation. See, stabilizing and restarting our supply chain, manufacturing, I think right through we did it, we responded. There are multiple interventions we made to keep our team safe, both in the field and in the factories. Restructuring cost, managing cash and liquidity. We know that liquidity has come down in the marketplace. We also knew we needed to support our stockists, which we did. It was important to really, really see that your collections came in, and we did manage to achieve that. I told you about reverse migration, so it was important to strategize across sectors and geographies because we saw consumption going up in the rural markets, and we have the people advantage. We have the biggest field force in the country, and it was important to strategize in such a manner that we could drive this. So in the initial days, the extensions were much safer. We told people that if you are going to do work, why not travel to the extensions? Because people were now looking at their local doctors. And I think that is one strategy which we really, really executed. Digital and technology transformation. We were already on the path. As an organization, we have great belief in the power of digital. And I think at every single interface, we are driving this. The last thing is help society during COVID-19. I think this is very important for an organization because if an organization is to become a leader in its industry, in its segment, it is important to behave like a leader. In times of crisis, it is important to show your human side. And I think Mankind as an organization stepped up and showed how human and how sensitive it is to all their stakeholders and all their partners. I think we were one of the first companies to step up and make a donation of around 64 crores to the Prime Minister's Relief Fund, 51 crores from the company. And this was a cash support, not in kind, plus for nearly 14 crores from the employees. We did not stop there. We did realize, that we were doing things for stockists, we were doing things for chemists, but nobody was thinking about the bridge between the two, the stockist boys. I think Mankind, we understood this, that they were the people who were pretty challenged because they were the ones going and reaching the medicine. And we gave 1% of our sales to the stockist boys in the month of March and April, which is quite an amount you'll appreciate. Besides this, you would have also heard that about 20 days back, we announced 5 lakh rupees for the families of every doctor who has passed away fighting this COVID virus. I think at Mankind, we realize that our partnership with doctors, chemists, stockists, nurses cannot be only about business. It's a connection between an organization which is very, very human with all their stakeholders. And I think this sensitivity has led us to act in this direction. So this is what we have done to get the results that we have got. And you will see at the core of the overall strategic approach is to really, really respect our own people, keep them safe, and yet give them that strategic advantage which will make them win. At no point of time during the crisis did we give up dreaming, did we give up our aspirations. And I truly believe this crisis has catalyzed our hunger to really, really grow faster and go faster in this Indian farmer market. This is a song from Cristovan, Andhra Tutto Bene. It means everything is going to be fine. And that is something we have always, always believed. And this is something I personally believe. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure and honor speaking to all of you and sharing my thoughts. Thank you so much.
So, thank you for that insightful session full of learnings. And I'm especially going to remember that egg and the chicken slide for a long time to come. So, it's not only about the crisis, but what are the opportunities presented by the crisis. So, thank you to all our participants for having been on the show. Do tell your friends. They can all view this webinar. And I want to remind you that on Friday, we are going to have a very interesting question answer session with Atish again. So if you have any questions, do write them in the discussion forum and we will answer your questions. And if at any point of time, after gaining confidence from listening to the case study of Mankind by Atish Majumdar, you want to do a pilot, Credo Web and Medulla Communications and Praful Akali and Medicine Man together can help you on your digital adoption journey. So thank you. Thank you again, Atish, and good evening to all of you.